we're going to create a cranial orthosis for a stuffed animal or doll similar to the one pictured here. And the program we're going to use to do that is Tinkercad. Go to tinkercad.com and either log in if you already have an account or sign up if you don't. I have an account, so I'll log in. Once you're logged in, click on Designs on the left-hand side, then click Create and click 3D Design. We'll start by changing the name of the design. Now, the way Tinkercad works is it will combine these basic shapes that are on the side or subtract shapes from one another. So we'll see what I mean by that as we move along. But before we get too far into it, I also want to make sure that you know that you're not limited to just these basic shapes. If you click where it says basic shapes, you'll see that there are lots of other categories of shapes that you can find and play around with. I'm going to start by clicking and dragging out this half sphere. Now I need to resize this half sphere so that it will fit on the top of my stuffed octopus. So the first thing I need to do is to measure the octopus, and using calipers you can see that the diameter of the octopus head is 155 millimeters and the distance from the top to where the cap will end is 65 millimeters. So back in Tinkercad, I can click on the object to select it, and then click any one of these white boxes in the corners to select the dimensions. Now I'm going to change the X dimension from 20 to 150, and then I'll change the scroll out with 2 fingers. Click and drag it over so I can see what's going on. Okay, now I'll change the Y dimension to 150. I have a big flat hemisphere. I'll click this middle white box, that's the height, and I'll change that to 65 as we measured on the stuffed animal itself. Now the shape that we have here is the same size and shape as the octopus head, so we want that to be cut out of the cap. So we're going to change the shape from a solid to a hole or negative shape. I'm going to click on the shape once again, click Duplicate, and it doesn't look like anything happened, but it actually created a duplicate copy right on top of the existing one. I'll drag that duplicate over to the side so I can see it better. Turn it back into a solid. Now we determine how thick we want the cranial orthosis to be. Let's say we want 2 millimeters. So if the hole is 150 by 150, we'll want the shell itself to be 154, right? 2 millimeters on each side by 154. And the height was 65, and we need a couple more millimeters up there, so we'll say 67. The next operation can be helpful if you look at it from the top. So I'll click the box in the upper left-hand corner so that we're looking straight down. And I'm also going to click this button here so that we're looking at a flat or orthographic view. So you can try to center these by eye, but you don't need to rely on doing it that way. If you click and drag anywhere that touches those 2 shapes, you'll select both of them. And then on the top, there's an align tool. So we'll click that and we'll center the 2 objects from right to left by clicking the center dot, and we'll center the 2 objects backwards and forwards by clicking the center dot there. Now both of these objects are still selected, so I'm going to click the group tool, and the hole will be cut out of the solid shape, and we can verify that's the case by rotating, looking at it from the bottom, and you can see that there's now a hollow shell here. Next, we're going to want to cut slits into the side through which we can pass our strap that will secure the cranial orthosis to our stuffed animal. And to do that, I'm going to click and drag out a box that's already a negative. I could have dragged out a solid box and then just turned that to a hole. So you can turn any shape into a hole. I'm going to tap the F key on my keyboard to focus in and zoom in on that shape so I can see it more clearly. The height of the slit I want to be 4 millimeters. And for the width, I've measured the strap that I'm going to be using, and it's 25 millimeters wide. So I'm going to make this just a little bit bigger, 26 millimeters. Zoom out, look at the object from the top, click and drag to select both, click Align to center the 2 objects. Now I'm going to click off the objects to deselect, click on just the box, and if I click this black dot in the middle, I can change just one dimension. So I'm going to click that box and drag it so that it goes all the way through. This way I'll have a slot on both sides. But if I zoom in, you can see that the slot is right at the bottom. It's not actually a slot, it's just cutting a divot out. So I want to, with just the hole selected, click on this black arrow, and that will allow me to drag the shape up. And you see the number here tells you how high up I've dragged that shape. So it's 3 millimeters off the surface, which means that this sliver of plastic here will be 3 millimeters thick, which is probably sufficient. With that done, I'm going to click and drag to select both and group those shapes. So I now have slits on both sides of this hollow semisphere. To center my shape again, I'm going to click the home view so it moves it back to the middle. I can see better what I'm doing. The next thing I want to do is cut off some portion from the top. So again, from the top view, I'm going to click and drag out one of these hole boxes and set it over here. When you're dragging out a shape, if you accidentally move it over an existing shape, you'll see what happens is that it wants to place that shape right on top of your existing shape. So to prevent that from happening, it's best to just set the new shape on the work plane over to the side, and then you can drag it over to wherever you want. So going back to this hole box, I'm going to click one of the corners and just drag it out so that it covers the entire shape of the cranial orthosis. Then I'm going to look at it from the front. Okay, it's covering everything. Now I'm going to select both shapes, click the Align tool, and click this top dot. So what that does is it aligns the tops of both of those shapes. If I look at it from the front, you can see that the tops of both of those shapes are aligned. Now I can select all and group, and I've cut a hole into the top of the orthosis. You don't have to replicate exactly what I'm doing. I'm just demonstrating some of the techniques for working through this process. In fact, if you have a teddy bear, you may need to cut out slits for the ears. Obviously, different shaped dolls will have different shaped heads and certainly different sizes. So feel free to experiment any way that you like. And especially with this next step, which is going to be to add some decoration. In my case, I'm going to keep it simple. Just going to drag out one of these hearts onto the work plane. Look at both shapes from the top. I'm going to select both and align them so they're centered. Then I'm going to click the heart, and just using the arrow key, I'm going to slide it closer to the headpiece and then look at it from the side, and you'll see that there are these curved arrows, and those are rotation arrows, and it'll rotate by clicks, or if you move your cursor outside of that ring, you can move any degree you want. So I'm going to look at this from the right. I'm going to drag the heart up and rotate it so that it's more or less in line with the front of that. It doesn't have to be exactly precise, but as close as I can get it. Now I'm using the right arrow key to move it to the right so that it will intersect the first shape. Okay. Now I'd like this to be halfway up, so I'm going to select both shapes, choose the Align button, scroll up so you can see better. I'm going to choose this middle button so it'll align both of those shapes vertically, up and down. And I'm looking at the underside of both the shapes to make sure that the heart went all the way through. Because what I'm going to do now is click to deselect, click on just the heart, and turn it into a hole. Now if I click and drag to select both shapes and group, you can see what I've done is cut out that heart shape from the orthosis. Now you can do that with any other shapes that are available to you on the side. Remember, you can search through and find all sorts of other designs here. If you want to add eyes or mustache, feel free to just look through and see what's available. There's lots of different shapes there. You can also download a shape from Thingiverse and import it into Tinkercad and use that to add to or subtract from your cranial orthosis. So for demonstration purposes, I'll call this good. Now I will click Export and choose STL. Then verify in my Downloads folder that my cranial orthosis has been downloaded. And there it is. The next step will be to slice this model and print it.